Law at Work is sponsored by Perrett van Niekerk Woodhouse Macholo, leading labour law specialists representing businesses throughout South and Southern Africa, as well as Case Law, the quick, fast and easy labour law search engine.
Hello, I'm Simon Colman and welcome to the Law at Work. The CCMA hears over 125,000 new cases each year. Many critics have stated that the Commission is overloaded and that in some instances employers get a raw deal. Today we take a closer look at the CCMA with the head of the organisation, Nerine Kahn. Welcome, Nerine.
Hello, Simon. Thanks for having me.
Nerine, you heard the intro. There's obviously criticism of the CCMA all the time, especially from employers. There's a tremendous number of cases that are going through your doors every day. I think it's 600 a day or something like that.
We log about 500 cases on average every day of the whole year.
Okay, that's a huge workload. There's been a lot of talk, obviously before things get to your level, there's a lot going on in the workplace, discipline in particular. Some employers are saying that the procedures are too stringent, that it's time consuming before they even get to the point of dismissal. Can you comment on that?
No, look, I think that there's a whole debate going on in the labour market about the fact that the labour market's become overly procedural. My personal view in relation to that is that it's a whole role and interaction that's happened between all the main players. And I know that employers like to blame commissioners and Labour likes to blame employers, etc. But actually, everybody's got an equal role to play, and let's be frank. What the employers have done is that they haven't updated all their procedures since the LRA came into place. They've stuck with the old pre-1996 procedures, and they cling to it, and they have a whole long process. Trade unions like to have several bites of the cherry. They like to deal with the process. They like to say this is what's happening, so the worker gets the opportunity to feel that they're going through the process.
Yes.
And then what's happened is that commissioners, and I'm quite open about being critical of them, is that they cling to the procedure. They, instead of having to deal sometimes with the substantive issues, they use the procedural defects out of an employer's own code, because the employer and the employees have agreed to that, as a way to try and find a solution and a settlement. It's not the way the labour market was intended to work. And we're busy trying very hard to change that attitude in the labour market at the moment.
Is that something you can address, certainly internally with training?
Sure.
At the CCMA?
I'm addressing it in a whole lot of ways. I'm addressing it in relation to the work that I do with the social partners who are, remember the CCMA is a tripartite body.
Yes.
So the tripartite body is governed by organised business, organised labour and government, and working with people, and I think that some of the other guests on your program would have covered some of those things. And in addition to that, we're talking to commissioners, reminding them of the issues. And one of the things I'm saying is this, that the CCMA is subject to the jurisdiction of the Labour Court, which is an important point. And the Labour Court's got an oversight role. And the Labour Court itself, in interpreting some of the Commissioner's decisions, has also been very, very strict procedurally in interpreting some of those aspects. So we're in a bit of a catch-23 situation, if I could say that, because we've got caught between the three sets of parties.
Yes.
So that's the one issue. The second thing is that obviously we are training commissioners, and one of the things that we're doing is we're reminding them, in terms of the Labour Relations Act, you need to go back to the Code of Good Practice. You need to talk about the Code of Good Practice, and you need to deal with it. Sorry, when I talk about that, it's the Code of Good Practice on unfair dismissals at the back of the Labour Relations Act. Okay, and basically say to the parties, this is the principle, these are the things that you've got to follow, this is what you've got to do. And these are the core principles. For example, and let me use this as a classic example that I use, the Labour Relations Act does not, and that code does not enjoin you to have a complicated disciplinary inquiry. It says you shouldn't have an appeal, you don't have to have it. The fact that people have chosen to do that, that's not the CCMA's fault. The CCMA's role then is to actually interpret whether you followed the codes that you yourself have agreed to.
Employers would say we're doing it because the unions are going to attack us on a procedural issue.
Sure they do, but then who's got the power in the negotiation? Because you would set out, remember there's a whole collective bargaining process, and that kind of disciplinary code would be agreed to between you and your workforce. So if you're allowing that to happen, I can't really take responsibility for that. My role is that my commissioners obviously have to interpret it in that way. But do I think that if you're an employer of a domestic worker, that you should be enforced to have a long, complicated disciplinary procedure? The answer to that is I don't. And I would specifically, in training and sensitization and discussion about what's going on in relation to social partners, I would specifically tell commissioners that that's unacceptable.
Okay. Nerine, why is it that there is so much, or why is it that there's no focus or very little focus on substantive issues? Does it come back to the training issue?
No, I don't agree with you that there's not enough focus on substantive issues. I think it's easier to mediate
easier
a
target
dispute,
on the procedure.
okay, to look at procedure. And, you know, one of the things that I say is that we're still trying to find some of the things in our new democracy. And I think sometimes that your sense of fairness and my sense of fairness might be different to somebody else's sense of fairness. And what commissioners might be doing is shying away from that. Am I trying to make sure we address it? The answer is yes. Okay. And I'm looking at that very actively.
Nerine, some of the more positive stuff. What would you say is your biggest achievement since you've been with the Commission?
As a director?
Yes.
Look, I mean, I think let's start in relation to, I think I'd say three things, all right. Firstly, the efficiencies within the CCMA itself, and I know you measure us, have improved remarkably in the last year. Okay. And the turnaround times and the cases. And I set specific goals to make sure that the CCMA itself absolutely met all its statutory obligations first and not other goals.
Right.
So I would say that there's no conciliation anymore that ever gets scheduled outside the 30 days, which is required in terms of the Labour Relations Act, which is absolutely essential, unless the parties agree. All right. We've had a problem which is endemic. It's not perfect, but it's gone from being at 35% to about 8%, and that is arbitration awards within the CCMA now come out within 14 days. Okay. We've been very strict on that. And that the average turnaround time for an arbitration, unless there are lots of witnesses and it's a long drawn-out process, is under 60 days. Now, if you compare that to any other court or any other judiciary body, it's a phenomenal achievement in relation to that.
Yes.
I mean, that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think when I went into the CCMA, I didn't realize the extent to which it was underfunded. Right. And I've succeeded in talking to both the Department of Labour and the Minister of Labour and obviously National Treasury and improving the CCMA's resourcing. It probably needs more. And as a result of that, I'm in a better position to position the CCMA and improve the professionalism and employ more skilled people. And being able to develop our training in a far more better way, and also do a lot more advocacy work and do more publicity, et cetera, et cetera. And internally, that also allows me to recognize my staff in a better way. Right. So I consider that a really important thing, because if you've got happy people inside, then they project that to happiness outside. All right. Then I think the third thing, I've done a lot of other things, but particularly is that we are busy taking our case management system, which is considered world-class in its achievements, and we've web-enabled it, and part of the criticisms that have come across is that the CCMA doesn't extend enough into rural areas. We now have the case management system in every Department of Labour office and Labour centre across the country. And so while the people who are there, if you're a worker dismissed or an employer and you want to find out about your case, well, you won't be able to log your case there. You could go in, find out the details, and it will automatically, if there's a query, email.
You could go into the website and look it up.
You can't do that yet. You will be able to shortly. Okay. But you will be able to go into a Department of Labour office anywhere in the country and get access to the case management system, which we think is a huge improvement in our reach in relation to that.
Absolutely.
I mean, also, we've actively improved our training, both of commissioners internally. We focus very strongly on that this year, but also, you know, on an annual basis at the moment, we touch about 7,000 people in our training, both for trade unions, trade union organisers, employers organisations, seminars, breakfasts, etc. in relation to that.
Excellent. You have been busy. What's next?
Okay. Well, I think one of the things I need to reflect on is that I need to ask myself, why have we had such a very busy industrial strike season? And I'll be analysing that and working in relation to that. I think it's not really to do with what's going on in industrial relations. I think it's to do in the broader political society and the issues that have been going on there. So that's been quite a challenge in relation to that. But having said that, one of the things that I've been doing is that I want to take the CCMA back into not being such a procedural organisation, and one of the ways I'm doing that is to focus the organisation back on to being a mediation organisation and not an arbitration organisation.
Nerine, I have to stop you there. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. You at home, goodbye.
Law at Work is sponsored by Kahn.flv Woodhouse Macholo, leading labour law specialists representing businesses throughout South and Southern Africa, as well as Case Law, the quick, fast and easy labour law search engine.